nous retrouvons dans cette leçon consacrée aux mémoires controversées et aux héritages en toponymie. Et nous retrouvons également Dr Melissa Wanjiru-Mvita, qui va nous parler aujourd'hui de ce qui se passe au Kenya dans ce champ. So, Melissa, please, would you tell us about the issue of heritage in place naming today in Kenya?
Okay, thank you, Professor Frederick. So I will speak about especially the post-colonial heritage of naming in Kenya and how this occurred, especially after Kenya gained independence. So in the words of the first president of Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta, when he went to open the satellite station in November of 1970, he said this: "I have today decided to change the name of this station from Mount Margaret Satellite Station to Mount Longonot. Mount Margaret is not an indigenous African name," he exclaimed. This sudden name change of Mount Margaret to Mount Longonot was a reflection of the determined effort by the post-colonial government of Kenya to detach from and erase colonial imprints from the Kenyan landscape. A critical scholarship of toponymy that emerged in the 1990s aims at studying toponyms not as mere space signifiers, but as imprints which are products of socio-political processes with symbolic messages to pass across. As shown in the example we gave at the start of this video, the period after independence in Kenya was pivotal in shaping the narrative of who owned and belonged to Kenya, and thus who could or couldn't have a place named after them. In this case, the foreign, that is British colonial, had to go, and the indigenous, that is Kenyan or African, was going to remain. In this video, we explore through the eyes of critical toponymy the naming practices in post-colonial Kenya and the various forms it took.
And how toponymy was used as a tool of decolonization in post-colonial Africa?
In the latter half of the 20th century, Africa witnessed the gaining of independence of many countries. There was then the call for decolonization in all spheres, be it political, social, or economic. The decolonization process began not only by purging the colonial quote-unquote intruders from positions of power, but also through the removal of other colonial symbols, such as street names and monuments, and replacing them with nationalist memorials in honor of those who fought for independence. Names thus became representations of change in political leadership as well as political ideology.
And were there any controversies in toponymy in Kenya?
Yes, of course, there were many controversies, especially with regard to who was going to be named. Of course, when the new leaders came in, there was not a clear policy on who was supposed to receive which honor. And thus there was a power struggle with regard to which name would be allocated to which personality. And sometimes this brought controversies. And this is especially because of the multicultural or multi-tribal nature of the Kenyan society, whereby some tribes are more prominent than others. And what happened in this case is that some tribes got more people from their own tribe having places named after them as compared to other tribes. And this actually caused controversy.
And What about the promotion of nationalism and Pan-Africanism in toponymy in Kenya?
Okay, so renaming was one of the prominent ways through which decolonization was initiated, and nationalism was a major theme in this process. For example, in the first major renaming exercise, many street names proposed celebrated themes of freedom and as well commemorated political and nationalist leaders who had steered Kenya to independence. This included Princess Elizabeth Way, which was renamed to Uhuru Highway. So Uhuru in this case means freedom in the Swahili language. And this was a major theme of promoting nationalism. There was another street called Coronation Avenue, which was renamed to Harambee Avenue. So Harambee means coming together or pulling resources together. And in the Kenyan context, Uhuru and Harambee, which mean freedom and pulling together, respectively, were two of the biggest themes in post-colonial or post-independent Kenya. So these were some of the name changes which were used to honor post-colonial leaders. So some of the name changes to honor these leaders, for example, included Delamere Avenue. Delamere, who was a colonial settler, he was a farmer. The street which had been named after him was renamed to Kenyatta. And Kenyatta, as you know, was the first president of Kenya. This was the biggest street within the central part of Nairobi, and therefore signified the power that was held by the first president. We have other streets such as Handage Street, which was named to Kimathi Street. Dedan Kimathi was the leader of the Mau Mau fighters. Then we have Sadler Street, changed to Koinange Street, Stewart Street to Mwindi Mbingu Street, among others. In addition, during this time, there was a wave of Pan-Africanism, since many African countries had just gained or were on the verge of gaining independence. Consequently, a number of streets in the central part of Nairobi, that is Nairobi being the capital city of Kenya, were renamed after important African leaders of the time. Among these were Haile Selassie, Julius Nyerere, who was Tanzania's first president. Then we have Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of Ghana, among other leaders. Then we have streets which were named after African cities, such as Gaborone, which is the capital of Botswana. We have Accra in Ghana, Lagos in Nigeria. And these renamings gave Nairobi a strong African identity.
Many thanks, Melissa, for presenting and interpreting these very rich experiences and very rich examples. Nous aurons le plaisir de retrouver Dr Melissa Venjirum-Vita dans un autre module, le dernier en l'occurrence, mais continuons maintenant avec le thème de celui-ci, le module, et de cette leçon plus particulièrement, à savoir les héritages controversés.